it is not purely a Western thing. It is a very human enterprise, as it lives very much across the entire world. So I've talked more than a few times on this channel about the fact that practicing science doesn't give one a moral compass. And I think this particular piece actually speaks a lot to that. In past, I've also talked about the difference between science and scientism. Scientism being the belief that that every and all questions, including the moral ones, can all be answered by science. We don't need philosophy. We don't need religion. And the truth is, a lot of great scientists in history from the beginning, from days of Greece and what have you, were also religious people. A good example is Ibn al-Hathim. Oh goodness, I butchered the pronunciation of his name. Can't do that very well. But the Arabian fellow, he was a Muslim, and he gave us one of the prime concepts of science, empiricism. So it's certainly distinctly possible, and many times over in history, scientists and mathematicians and engineers have been very religious people. And like I've said before, science doesn't give a moral compass, and religion can be one of the places where you get that moral compass. That's not to say you can't be atheist and you can't be atheist and a scientist. No, you can be atheist and you can be a scientist. That's not the point. My thing is that I don't think, because of the way science is done, that you can get your moral compass from scientific practice and being a scientist. No, you have a moral compass from your values, from your beliefs, and then you take that with you as a person. And from there, it's however evidence you fit in from the scientific process, what you interpret that in your worldview, if you're not a scientist, or if you are a scientist and reading somebody else's work, happens. There is all of that. So this is from the Heterodox STEM Substack page. And for those of you who don't know, the Heterodox Academy is a great group of people, basically nonpartisan, but promote diversity, viewpoint diversity in academia, in particular for the benefit of research and of the workplace in academia. And under Heterodox Academy, there's a number of communities, and this is the Heterodox STEM community, has their own Substack where they talk about these issues as it relates to STEM. If you remember this name, Dorian Abbott, you might be familiar with it because I have talked about him a few times on this channel, and he does manage the Heterodox STEM Substack here also. So I thought this would be an interesting piece to go through in relation to the idea that being a scientist does not give one a moral compass in the slightest. So, the heavens declare the glory of God. From February 15th, the Heterodox STEM Substack. A little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy bringeth man's minds about to religion. From Francis Bacon. A child walks along the seashore with his mother and asks, "Why is the sea blue?" "The sea is blue, son, because it reflects the sky." "Why is the sky blue?" he persists. "God made it blue," she replies. The next day, he asks his science teacher the same question, who explains that the sky is blue because the molecules in the atmosphere scatter short wavelength blue light much more efficiently than other wavelengths. This is a very true statement, actually. That is exactly why the sky is blue. Appears blue because that's what's scattered efficiently and reaches your eye. The boy finds this a far more stimulating response that provokes a tantalizing array of new questions. What is a wavelength? And why are the blue ones scattered so efficiently? Inspired, he resolves to study science. He starts with basic optics and learns the principles that relate the wavelength of a light ray to its angle of refraction. But what precisely is waving, and why must it refract at all? This takes some time to answer, but when he finally encounters the work of Maxwell, those 5 equations seem to him the holy grail. Until he perceives their full implications. A speed that does not depend on the reference frame. Impossible! Onwards to Einstein he goes, studying relativity and the photoelectric effect. But the nature of light remains elusive. Undeterred, he plunges into the inevitable morass of quantum mechanics. He never stops asking why. This is very true of a lot of scientists. A lot of us, we ask one question that leads to another question, that leads to another question, that leads to another question. I find a lot of scientists are very, very curious people. Men, women, and from all over the world, very curious people, wanting to know why is it, why is it, why is it this, why is this thing the way it is? And that is that deep longing of why, that is the pursuit of the truth there. But you can only go so far with science. You can't go to the moral questions. And I think they get into that, if I recall correctly here. You can't get into the full-on moral questions of why things are arranged the way they are. Sometimes you can't get into the moral questions of why certain events happen the way they do with science, because that's not the domain of science. But one day, it dawns on the grown man that he is no closer to answering his original question. Could even a theory of everything tell him why? Sure, the sky is blue because the laws of physics require it to be so. But why are the laws this way and not another? What compels the entire universe to obey them? What wisdom must be contained within these laws? That they enable him to exist, to ask these questions and search for the answers, and in doing so, to discover the law themselves. Who could think up such a set of equations? Can he simply take their timeless existence for granted without asking where they came from? To do so would seem disturbingly similar to accepting the religious dogmas he had been trained to scorn. Science and atheism had seemed like firm allies as long as he carefully limited the range of his questioning, but not so much anymore. Could his mother have been right after all? And this is a thing. I mean, as I said, there's not to say that you can't be an atheist and be a scientist. You absolutely can be. And many scientists today, many scientists actually have been atheists also. That's totally okay. My point in this is that you just, what do you do when you get to those points where you hit the brick wall of, well, maybe it can't tell me everything? And that's going to be the next fun question. Some would say it can't. And I mean, we might get there at some point. But for a lot of scientists, I find there's a recognition that science can only tell you so much, but what tells you the rest? What tells you the rest about the way life works and how you go about that life and all those different things that science just can't tell you something. And I think, the idea of why, everybody starts off with why something is, but in a way, science is not about the why as much as it is about the how. Now, it is about the why in the sense of when we observe something in the physical world, we try to figure out the physical process of why something happens. So there's the why physical, but the why kind of moral. Why is it ordered this way and not some other way is a totally different thing. And there may be a physical reason for that in that, why not have it be just organized by physical, there's some other physical relationship we don't know about yet that we haven't figured out that could be organizing all these things. Well, okay, why is that physical relationship in existence? And so this is certainly interesting. You do the natural curiosity pursuit. You do hit a point where you might find yourself hitting a brick wall with what you can answer with science. At a fundamental level, science is a methodology for how the discovery of knowledge about the natural world designed to answer the question how, which is the true question the young boy on the beach was asking. But science cannot, even in principle, answer the deeper question of the grown man. Why? And this is the difference. I found this very profound when I read it earlier, in that, yeah, as kids, we might say, well, why is it like that? Why is it like that? The idea of the toddler. Well, why? 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 And eventually, as a parent, you hit a brick wall. And you're just like, I don't know why. Or you're just like, okay, because it's that way. Or because God said it that way. Any number of different things there. But it's really fascinating, and I did find it very profound. As you do get older, you do ask the deeper question of why something is, and you realize all those little questions you were asking are really more about how something is. And how is a lot of the way the world is there, with the physical, natural world. when you're dealing with that with science and in STEM. As Bishop Robert Barron has argued, quote, though the sciences may be able to understand the chemical compounds that make up paper and ink, the sciences will never understand the meaning of a book, end quote. We can investigate the physical properties of the book using science, but the ideas within, the meaning of the symbols, the eternal truths or errors that may be held within those pages, simply cannot be reduced to an arrangement of molecules. The same is true for art. We can explain the basic physics of how the violin makes noise of a certain pitch, but are completely at a loss when we attempt to explain why Beethoven's Ode to Joy is beautiful using the scientific method. You can't with that. It's a subjective thing. And this is where we can't get rid of philosophy, right? You have to have some belief system, very philosophical belief system, and for myself and a lot of others, it does center around your religious beliefs. It does not have to, absolutely not. But I don't think you can. Well, I find scientism as something here. This is sort of the opposite of scientism, definitely. Not the opposite of scientism, I should say, because you have scientism and then you have science and religion that works together, and then you have just religious fanaticism down on the other end, where there is absolutely no scientific thing that is embraced. But you have a balance in this, I think, is what is the right thing. So let's see. Nor can science provide us with a framework to tell the difference between right and wrong. This is the point I was trying to get to right here. They said it much more succinctly than I could. The author said it much more succinctly than I could in this, in that, no scientific practice that search for answering how something is, or the physical why. I think it's a physical why, if you will, if you're talking about the natural world, rather than a how. There's the physical why, and then I guess there's the moral and philosophical why. Let's put it that way. There's two different whys. That might be a better way to phrase it than to say, well, I like the how and why, but philosophical why and the physical why. Two very different why questions. But that's the thing, is that no amount of science can provide a moral compass. No amount of scientific practice can say what is right and what is wrong to do. That's why I get concerned about some studies that I see, and this is why we actually have internal review boards for a lot of social science studies, is to make sure you are not doing something incredibly unethical to children or to adults or to people in terms of the scientific research in there. And you can answer any question. It doesn't necessarily make it right to do the experiment, particularly when you're involving people or children in particular, or pets, animals. Though all those kinds of things require internal review board approval at universities to make sure that you're not going to be engaging in something that is inhumane or cruel, inadvertently. And why do we have those things? Because science doesn't give us the moral compass of right and wrong. That's a societal thing, and that's a values thing. That's a very philosophical thing also, or a religious thing, depending if you are a religious person. And so that's why I bring this up again, that science can never, ever, ever, science can't provide a moral framework. At the same time, it is very tied with Enlightenment values in that, you want to have the pursuit of the truth. You want to be doing things based upon evidence, and that the objective truth is a real thing. This is where it's interesting, because in the postmodernist sense, when you're talking about a lot of relativism, the truth is relative, and there is no moral absolutes of right and wrong in a postmodernist framework. And that opens the door in a scientific context to doing a huge amount of things that, for me personally, for a lot of people, may very well be highly unethical because of the moral absolute of right and wrong that exists for some people. So you end up with some interesting conflict, perhaps, with postmodernist thought coming into contrast with this kind of thinking. Consider Fritz Haber, a German scientist. Haber won the Nobel Prize for his role in the development of industrial synthesis of ammonia, a revolution that has saved billions from starvation. Yet this same invention was used to manufacture munitions, and Haber also used his scientific talents to develop poisonous gases that led to the slow and painful deaths of hundreds of thousands in the First World War. Science cannot provide an ethical or moral framework for Haber because it can. Science did not provide an ethical or moral framework for Haber because it cannot. It is merely an amoral method that we use to increase our knowledge about nature. And that is exactly the point with this. And this is why it is a bad thing to get into politicizing science also, because you then force upon science that it should provide a moral framework for something when that is not the thing that science does. It is merely a framework for answering all of those different questions. It doesn't provide the ethical or moral framework or the moral compass in this. Some believe that science is a superior alternative to faith. But if we peer a little deeper, we can see that the scientific method actually requires a great deal of faith before it can even get off the ground. For example, here are 5 axioms that every scientist, often unconsciously, believes. The entire physical universe obeys certain laws, and these laws do not change with time. Our observations provide accurate information about reality. The laws of logic yield truth. The human mind recognizes the laws of logic and can apply them correctly. Truth ought to be pursued. None of these can be proved by science. They must be assumed in order to do any science at all. They are articles of faith. The 4 yeah, I'm gonna have to say that, here for sure. And the idea with a lot of these things is that these things are real and exist, but we merely give names to them. This is in contrast to the postmodernist thought in that we construct our entire reality through language. You speak it into existence, or it's a social construction. That is not true in what most scientists think, in that, there are physical laws and things that are physically based that do not change regardless of our perception of them. And that our observations can provide accurate information here, and that the truth is a good thing to be pursued. And this is one of the biggest ones, that objective truth, that things that are, regardless of our beliefs, still exists and is a good thing to pursue. That is one of the prime teloses of science. That is the prime telos of science, as I have said, and the scientist also, is the pursuit of the truth. The 4th point especially bears elaboration. Our ability to think rationally must be assumed before any of our thought processes can be trusted. Without this assumption, we can get absolutely nowhere. Though every human must make it, critically, not all worldviews are capable of supporting it. Consider that no other rational species exists on Earth or has yet to be found in the entire universe. Clearly, evolution cannot be relied on or even expected to produce rational beings. Moreover, if all our thoughts are simply the product of chemical reactions governed solely by the laws of physics, then there is no reason for them to have any correspondence with the truth. Assuming that we can think rationally, the atheist's account of our origins offers us compelling reasons to doubt the validity of that very assumption. Wow, okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting take on that. Here, I think it reminds me of a quote, actually, when I think about it. I forget who said it, but it was something to the effect of, if the brain were so simple we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. And a very interesting kind of comment there. I really wish I could remember who said it, but I know the quote from somewhere. So, yeah? Interesting. I'm not sure quite what to think there. This is the first time I've read this whole thing over, so I might have to come back to that, and maybe I'll do a little bit more just for locals, just to be thinking on it. Anyway, Christianity, on the other hand, offers a different starting point. The Bible makes 2 profound claims that are relevant to science. First, that the universe was created by a good, wise, and powerful and wise creator who endowed it with structure and beauty, and constantly upholds it by his power. The assumption that God's creation is not random and chaotic, but rather orderly and rational, was necessary for scholars to begin to pursue knowledge via what is now known as the scientific method. And this is, I've got to make a point here that this is not just a true thought of European scientists and where the modern day scientific method came from, but also for those who were the originators of the scientific method. Because, like I said, empiricism came from the Golden Age of Islam. Actually, that's one of the fundamental things now, and that was, Muslim scientists, Greek scientists. The Greeks were quite religious in their religious beliefs. The Egyptians, of course, had their beliefs at the time. So it's not like it's not unknown that different religions have said that, created the world as orderly and rational. And it's not purely a Western thought either to have that idea. That's been held by many, many, many different cultures and religions across the world. So that's just a point to be made there. Even atheists today implicitly make use of this fundamental assumption. I will be very curious if any atheists end up watching this. I'd be genuinely just very curious to hear your thoughts. You're welcome to let me know. You're welcome to let me know what you think. I'm just very curious. I've said myself many times I am a Catholic. So I take a different point. But this is very interesting to me. And I would be curious to hear your thoughts. And it also explains why so many deeply religious people have been among the most important scientists historically. For example, Galileo, despite his differences with the church, was a pious Catholic. Fun fact about Galileo, when he put forward the notion that the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around, the Catholic Church did not like him, and he was put under house arrest. Yes, it would have been in a villa in Italy, so not like house arrest wouldn't have been terrible. But he was put under house arrest. He was forced to renounce it in front of the church and put under house arrest for the rest of his life. And I think it was like 300 years later. It was in like the 1990s or something like that when the Catholic Church finally apologized for doing that. So it was certainly interesting. Newton, although certainly not an Orthodox Christian, was nevertheless a believer. James Clerk Maxwell and Lord Kelvin were both devout Presbyterians, with Kelvin commenting that, quote, the more thoroughly I conduct scientific research, the more I believe science excludes atheism. If you think strongly enough, you will be forced by science to the belief in God, which is the foundation of all religion. Gregor Mendel made some of the most important contributions to the theory of genetics and was also an Augustinian friar. The Big Bang was first theorized by Belgian priest Georges Lemaitre. Examples abound. The view that science and Christianity are incompatible is not only incorrect, it is disproven by history. The second scriptural claim is that man is both flesh and spirit. We are flesh, and so our bodies are subject to the laws of physics. But we are not only flesh. As spirits, we have a God-given ability to reason, to search for truth, and to discover the God who made us in his image. The worldview provides truly fertile ground for robust scientific inquiry. Within it, our 5 axioms are no longer arbitrary. Science has flourished in the West, not in spite of its Christian foundation, but precisely because of it. And I don't disagree with that necessarily, at least for Christian scientists, but I wouldn't argue that I don't agree that Christianity is alone in that. Because as I said, many of the main things that have led to the modern day scientific method have originated in the ancient world, where you had many different religions that were involved that were certainly not Christianity. So I would make a point in that it's certainly not a thing. And as I have said many times, that while science may very well have flourished in the West, it is not purely a Western thing. It is a very human enterprise, as it lives very much across the entire world. So I don't necessarily agree with that. And hey, authors, if you're listening, I would actually love to see you go dive into this a bit more with many other religions and, their thoughts on sciences and what have you, because Christianity is certainly not the only one in here, though maybe the most prominent. It is certainly not the only one. All of this is to say, not only is there inherent conflict between science and Christianity, but the Christian worldview actually motivates and supports the scientific enterprise. Both science and Christianity are systems of thought based on logic, reason, and evidence, which complement and build off each other. How much greater is the believer's wonder at creation, given its tremendous magnitude and complexity, than have been revealed by modern science? How could science work without the axioms that naturally flow from Christianity? And what ultimate motivation could we have for doing it? Whereas science excels at answering how questions and has dramatically improved the physical conditions under which we exist, Christianity deals with why. Question deals with why questions, motivates the fundamental assumptions necessary to do science, and provides us with a reason to continue existing at all. Very, very fascinating piece, and I think a very well done piece. Although, again, like I said, I would actually like to see them dive a little bit more, not just into Christianity, but there's many other religions under which this could apply. And I don't think atheists are alone necessarily in what they believe, because as I said, science doesn't provide, and they said it themselves too. Science itself doesn't provide a moral basis for anything, but the religious beliefs or the philosophical beliefs of the individual do. And so I would love to see how they pair that with the philosophical beliefs of an atheist, for instance, in this. So I would love to see an opposing piece. So I put that challenge to the authors of this piece of the Heterodox STEM. If you like this video, hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good jazz, and don't forget to come on over to shiosofia.locals.com, shiosofia.locals.com if you want more related content here. I'm going to be trying to line up some guests to go on soon, and I will be doing some other things, so things are growing nicely. I'm kind of pleased with some of the stuff that's going on. So until next time, I'm Adrian, and I hope you all stay curious, my friends.